Everyone on a bird construction site has the right to work in a safe and healthy environment. We want all workers to leave the job every day as healthy and safe as when they arrived. This video will orient you to key components of our health and safety program and its policies, and the expectations and requirements of anyone working on one of our projects. If you are not clear on any component of the bird safety program or your requirements while on site, or would like more information, speak to your supervisor or consult the Bird Health and Safety Manual located in the site office or lunchroom, or the Bird Safety Handbook. Founded by H.J. Bird in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan in 1920, Bird has grown into one of Canada's largest general contractors, executing interesting and complex projects for commercial, industrial, and institutional clients across Canada. On all of our projects, however, no matter how large or small, we share a common commitment to working safely. The health and safety rules discussed in this video apply to all employees and must be followed at all times. Those who fail to follow them will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including dismissal. Where bird policies differ from that of our subcontractors or clients, you must always work in accordance with the higher health and safety standard. Remember, it's your responsibility to work in a safe manner that protects yourself, coworkers, and others who are at or near the workplace. Carry out work in a manner that does not result in damage, and be sure to notify your supervisor of any unsafe conditions, near misses, or safety incidents. Accordingly, supervisors will take necessary precautions to protect the health and safety of employees under their supervision, ensuring ongoing compliance with health and safety procedures. They must cooperate with all staff and support committees on workplace health and safety, and they must model good health and safety practices. All workers have 3 rights: the right to know what hazards are present on the job, how these hazards can affect them, and how to protect themselves; the right to participate, to take part in health and safety activities; and the right to refuse any work that they believe to be unsafe. There is zero tolerance for fighting, horseplay, practical jokes, harassment, or interfering with safety, firefighting, or first aid equipment. Additionally, theft, vandalism, intentional abuse or misuse of company equipment will not be tolerated, and neither will sleeping on the job or reporting to or remaining at work when your ability to perform your duties safely is impaired in any manner. To prevent distractions, cell phones are not permitted at the worksite, and employees shall not use any device that requires headphones, such as iPods or MP3 players. Only authorized personnel are permitted to use cell phones while on the job site. Taking photos while on the job is prohibited, as is the posting of pictures or comments about the work site on any social media platform. On all bird sites, the following PPE is mandatory: CSA-approved safety glasses with side shields, CSA-approved hard hats with side impact protection, CSA-approved safety footwear with proper toe and ankle protection, CSA-approved high-visibility apparel, Type 2, Class 2, hand protection, long pants and sleeves. Some sites and provinces have different regulations for PPE requirements. Your site safety team will ensure all PPE meets site and provincial guidelines, but always work in accordance with the higher safety standard. Inspect PPE prior to use to ensure it is in good condition, and remove any PPE from service if deemed unreliable. Supervisors must ensure that defective, damaged, or worn equipment is repaired by qualified personnel or replaced. In addition, you may be required to wear additional PPE based on your task or the job at hand, including fall protection, face shields, or other PPE as required. Hearing protection must be worn by all workers when exposed to noise levels in excess of the specifications in your local legislation. Where respiratory protection is required, it must be properly fitted and the worker trained in its proper use. The safety absolutes are safety non-negotiables. 4 areas of construction activity where there is a high potential for serious injury or death resulting from unsafe work practices. They are fall protection, energy isolation, sometimes called lockout-tagout, excavation and trenching, confined spaces. There is a zero-tolerance policy with respect to these 4 safety absolutes. Failure to follow them will result in suspension or termination of employment. Falls through openings or from heights can result in serious injury or death. Guardrails, fall restraint, and fall arrest systems are all components of a comprehensive fall protection program. Safety absolute violations for fall protection would include things such as working at heights or wearing fall protection equipment without proper certification or training, not wearing a properly anchored harness when working at heights, tampering with fall protection equipment. You must be authorized and trained to perform work of an electrical nature. Always follow appropriate procedures to positively identify and isolate all energy sources before commencing work, and appropriately mark and tag all locking devices. The following activities would constitute a safety absolute violation for energy isolation: removing an isolation lock or tag when not authorized to, signing for another worker on a tag, not using the lockout-tagout procedure designed for the equipment. Never enter excavation or trenches until they conform to appropriate regulations. A safety absolute violation for excavation and trenching could include things such as removing any guardrail around the excavation, tampering with trench walls that are shored in accordance with an engineer's plans or specifications, entering an excavation where the slope does not meet legislated requirements. Confined spaces are enclosed or partially enclosed spaces having restricted access to traffic, which may be or become hazardous to workers. Prior to entering a confined space, a completed and signed confined space permit must be in place and be reviewed by all workers working in or entering the confined space. A safety absolute violation for confined space would include activities such as entering a confined space when not authorized to do so, not using a confined space permit with the appropriate procedure, tampering with confined space equipment, leaving a confined space unattended, with no safety watch person present while work is still underway. Employees who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol pose a safety hazard to everybody. BIRD is committed to a drug and alcohol-free workplace. This includes all project work sites, as well as company land, property, buildings, structures, plants, equipment, and vehicles. There is zero tolerance for noncompliance and is cause for immediate dismissal. Smoking is only permitted in designated areas at designated times, never in company vehicles or equipment, which includes traveling in company vehicles when off-site. Your work environment should be free from harassment, discrimination, and violence. You should never have cause to believe you are at risk of violence from another coworker. Respect the diversity brought to the workplace by other employees. If you witness inappropriate behavior, disparaging comments, or offensive conduct, challenge it, refuse to participate, and report it to a supervisor or manager. Violence, including threats of violence, will not be tolerated under any circumstances and will be cause for immediate dismissal. Note that you may be subject to disciplinary action if you become aware of a potential or actual incident of workplace violence but fail to report it or take immediate corrective action. Harassment is any unwelcome physical, visual, or verbal conduct and will not be tolerated. Under no circumstances will a legitimate complaint of harassment be dismissed, downplayed, or the complainant told to deal with it personally. If you experience harassment, advise the individual that their behavior is unwelcome and ask them to stop. Keep a record of the incidents. Report the problem to whoever you feel most comfortable talking to, a manager, supervisor, Josh, or HSC coordinator. Slips, trips, and falls are the most common cause of injury on construction sites. Some tips to avoid them. Use 3 points of contact when using a ladder or getting on/off a piece of equipment, and make sure ladders are on even ground. Be sure to wear appropriate non-slip safety footwear and keep an eye out for oil, grease, or water on walkways. Watch for ice and potential tripping hazards under freshly fallen snow. Maintain good housekeeping. Open holes are dangerous to workers. Use guardrails that meet local legislative requirements, or affix a solid cover that is marked "Hole, do not remove." Poor housekeeping creates unnecessary hazards and is a leading cause of slips, trips, and falls on construction sites. If you identify a hazard, never ignore it. Housekeeping is everyone's responsibility. If you see a housekeeping hazard, address it. Keep your work area clean and tidy at all times. Work areas include workshops, garages, vehicles, equipment, and job sites. Ensure walkways, floors, platforms, and all exits are kept clear of all material, equipment, or debris, and are well lit and properly ventilated. Eliminate or control slippery conditions. Store waste properly. Store materials in a manner that will not fall, block exits, or access to safety equipment. Properly contain, label, and store all hazardous materials and flammable liquids. To reduce personal injury and equipment damage, the following must be followed with company vehicles. All drivers must possess a valid driver's license. You must have formal authorization to drive company vehicles. Conduct an inspection of the vehicle before use to ensure it is in good repair and properly maintained. Vehicles must be kept clean. Cell phone use while driving, including texting, is strictly prohibited. All Bird Company vehicles must be backed into parking locations at all times, not just during working hours, unless it is unsafe to do so. Use wheel chocks as required. There is absolutely no parking allowed in emergency or fire lanes, in a space that blocks access to a fire hydrant, in handicapped parking spots, or in no parking zones. Use good defensive driving skills. Be alert, aware, and awake. Obey all speed limits and traffic signs, and adjust your driving to road and weather conditions. Any violations of the above, as well as damage or excessive wear to the vehicle resulting from your use, may result in disciplinary action and possible loss of driving privileges. Mobile equipment often limits operator visibility and hearing. Exercise caution around mobile equipment and be conscious of the swing radius of lifting equipment, excavators, and other heavy equipment. When approaching mobile equipment, always make eye contact with the spotter or operator and do not pass until signaled to do so. Do not park in an operator's blind spot and park light vehicles at least 50 meters away from the nearest piece of working equipment. When driving a pickup, maintain a 50-meter clearance. Operators working near power lines must maintain the minimum safe distance required by legislation. If equipment comes in contact with an energized source, do not approach it, and do not dismount the vehicle unless absolutely necessary. For example, if it caught fire. If you must dismount, shuffle away from the equipment. 25% of all construction injuries are back-related. Exercise care. Sudden improper movement, poor posture, weak muscles, and incorrect bending, lifting, and carrying are common causes of back pain. Bird has a mandatory stretching program, which is completed every morning prior to the beginning of the shift. Although not an exercise program, it has been proven to reduce the amount of muscle pulls, strains, and aches. All tools and equipment must be used and maintained as per the manufacturer's specifications. This means that trigger locks must be removed or disabled. Any tool or equipment in need of repair must be removed from service, tagged out of service, and not returned to service until repaired by qualified personnel. Tool inspections will be noted with color-coded tape for that quarter, and preventative maintenance will be performed on all equipment on an established schedule. Regular safety meetings provide an excellent opportunity for workers and supervisors to discuss all safety issues in an open and safe environment without fear of reprisal. These include new hire orientations, daily toolbox meetings, weekly safety meetings, JHA reviews, fall protection and confined space plans, job-specific safety training, such as aerial lift training, JOSH meetings where required. A JOSH committee will be established at all sites as required. Management will appoint an equal number of members, and meeting minutes are to be properly recorded and distributed. Prior to commencing work activities, subcontractors are responsible for having provided proof of appropriate training for all their workers for mandatory and task-specific work they will be performing on site. For example, fall protection, scaffold erection, elevated aerial work platform operation, material lift truck, forklift operation. If proof of training has not been provided, you will not be allowed to commence those work activities. Every worker is required by law to hold a valid Certificate of Workplace Hazardous Material Information System, or WHMIS training. If you do not have a valid WHMIS training certificate, you must arrange for this training with your supervisor prior to commencing work on site. A brief WHMIS quiz will follow this video as part of the orientation program. Inspections are one of the best tools available to find problems and assess risks before incidents or other losses occur. At BIRD, we have informal daily inspections performed by supervisors on an ongoing basis, but there are also planned, regularly scheduled formal inspections carried out by site supervision, which includes supervisors and craft workers. Your full cooperation in all inspections is required. Field-level hazard assessments are completed at the start of every shift or when tasks or conditions change. FLHAs are used to trigger thoughts about the hazards present and how to control them. They're filled out on the worksite, where hazards can be directly assessed. FLHAs are completed individually or as a crew if the crew is performing similar work in the same work area. If completing an FLHA as a crew, each member of the crew must participate in the observation, identification, and documentation process and must sign the FLHA. It must be filled out completely and signed off by the supervisor at the beginning of the day. It will also be revisited by the supervisor at or before the end of the day. BIRD requires all workers to immediately report all worker injuries, environmental spills, property damage, near misses, safety hazards, unsafe conditions. If injured on the job, seek appropriate first aid immediately to be appropriately assessed and treated. Even minor scratches, if left uncovered, can become infected and may lead to more serious problems. If an incident occurs, the area must be frozen. Do not move anything unless to prevent further loss. Report all incidents, no matter how small. An investigator's main interest is how to implement controls, not place blame. In case of an injury, get first aid if necessary. Report the injury as soon as possible. Seek timely medical treatment. Bring the treatment report back to your employer as soon as possible. Complete a worker's report of injury and submit to workers' compensation if required. If you are witness to a collapse or serious injury or incident where first aid is required, the person closest to the injured person must ensure the accident scene is safe and that there is no further danger to you or the injured person. Do not move the injured person unless there is a high risk of further injury and it is safe for you to do so. Keep calm and do not leave the injured worker unattended. Contact emergency services immediately and report the exact location of the patient and the patient's condition. Be prepared to assist when directed by the first aid attendant. BIRD will make every reasonable effort to provide temporary duties for employees who suffer a work-related injury or illness. All work will be meaningful and approved by a healthcare professional. Employees are required to participate in the program. Non-participation may lead to a loss of the workers' compensation benefits. If you discover a fire, alert everyone in the area, evacuate the area, and call for assistance. Do not jeopardize your own safety. If the fire is too big or out of control, leave it. If you must evacuate the area, report immediately to the designated muster station, sometimes referred to as emergency assembly points. If you attempt to extinguish the fire, keep your back to an exit in case you have to evacuate. To prevent fires, good housekeeping is essential. Smoking is prohibited, and fire extinguishers should be visible, up to date, and have clear access. Bird is committed to following sound environmental management practices so that the environment is not negatively affected. All environmental spills, regardless of the amount, into the air, land, or water, must be reported to your supervisor immediately. We will not hide any spills whatsoever. In some areas, bears, foxes, and other wild animals will come to work sites looking for food. Do not feed them under any circumstances. If you discover any evidence of archaeological sites or historical artifacts, do not disturb them. Immediately report the findings to your supervisor. All project sites must have an emergency response plan. Details of the emergency response plan for your site, including site-specific hazards, first aid stations and attendants, emergency alarms, air horns, and muster stations, will be covered in the site-specific portion of your orientation. Be sure to familiarize yourself with the location of all first aid stations, site emergency procedures, and muster stations. In most cases, Bird enforces discipline in a 3-stage process: verbal warning, written warning, and a potential suspension or termination. However, in instances where any worker willfully or repeatedly violates the safety rules and regulations, Bird will exercise strict discipline up to and including immediate termination. In situations involving the Bird safety absolutes, fall protection, confined space, excavation and trenching, and energy isolation, any employee flagrantly violating safe work practices and policies will be terminated immediately. Where violation of a safety absolute is not clearly flagrant, employees may still receive a suspension and be required to meet with a review panel before being allowed to resume work on a Bird site. Bird is committed to a culture of safe production on our sites so that all workers are able to return home at the end of the day healthy and safe. This requires partnership and commitment from everyone, working safely and working together every moment of every day. If you are not clear on any component of the Bird safety program or your requirements while on site, or would like more information, speak to your supervisor or consult the Bird Health and Safety Manual located in the site office or lunchroom, or the Bird Safety Handbook. Work safe. Go home safe. Be safe.